October 1944, deep in the shattered forests of Western Germany, the rain never seemed to stop and the mud clung to everything like it wanted to pull men under. A German patrol moved carefully along a narrow trail, boots sinking with every step, rifles ready, eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement. They felt safe for the moment, maybe too safe, because somewhere ahead, an American sniper lay hidden in the brush, breathing slow and steady, heart rate under control, watching them through a narrow gap in the wet leaves. He didn't move. He didn't rush. He just waited, because waiting was how you stayed alive out here, and patience was the difference between going home and being buried in foreign mud. This sniper wasn't famous, and his name never appeared in newspapers back home, because men like him fought wars in silence, where glory didn't matter and survival was the only medal worth earning. He was a quiet infantryman turned marksman, carrying a worn rifle, a handful of rounds, and one strange idea that would soon turn 3 days of fighting into an absolute nightmare for the German army. The idea was simple, almost laughable, when you think about it, and it involved nothing more than a bootlace and some basic understanding of how fear works. But in the chaos of war, simple ideas could kill more effectively than any fancy tactic dreamed up in some officers 10 miles behind the lines. The Germans believed they understood American snipers after months of hard fighting across France and into Germany. They thought Americans were reckless, impatient, and easy to flush out with a little pressure, a few grenades, and aggressive movement. That belief came from experience, from watching American forces push forward fast and loud through the French countryside, taking ground quickly but sometimes carelessly. But this man was different. He'd learned the hard way that speed got you killed, and patience mixed with genuine fear and desperate creativity kept you breathing for one more day. Quick thing before we continue, hit subscribe if you want more incredible World War II combat stories like this, because WW2 Vault dives into moments you won't hear about in history class. And this story is only getting darker from here. What the Germans didn't know was that this sniper had been watching them for hours before he ever pulled a trigger, studying their habits, counting their steps, memorizing how they moved through the forest, and listening to their voices drift through the trees. He noticed something important that most soldiers would have missed. Every time a single rifle shot rang out anywhere in the area, the Germans reacted the same exact way. Without fail, they froze for a split second, then sprayed bullets toward the sound, then waited in tense silence, then slowly advanced to investigate. They assumed one shooter. They assumed a man behind the trigger. They assumed they could overwhelm a single enemy with numbers and firepower. That assumption would cost them more lives than anyone could have predicted. The sniper took a bootlace from his pack, tied it carefully to the trigger of his rifle, stretched it back through the brush, and fixed the other end around a small branch behind him that would pull tight when disturbed. Then he crawled away, slow and careful, making sure not to disturb the wet leaves or snap any twigs, until he reached another hidden spot about 20 yards to the side where he had a clear view of the trail. From there, he waited again with his second rifle, finger resting near the trigger, eyes locked on the trail ahead, controlling his breathing and ignoring the cold rain that soaked through his uniform. When the German stepped into view, moving cautiously but not cautiously enough, he fired once. One clean shot. One man dropped hard. Panic followed immediately, just as he'd expected. German rifles cracked back in response, bullets ripping through leaves and bark and sending splinters flying. But the sniper was already gone from that first position and watching from safety as the Germans advanced, carefully down the trail, tense and angry and determined to find the shooter. One soldier brushed past a branch that held the bootlace. The rifle fired automatically. Another man fell, dead. The Germans stopped cold, confused and suddenly terrified. 2 shots, 2 different directions, 2 shooters. They thought they were wrong. But fear doesn't care about facts. By nightfall, confusion had set in deep among the German ranks as word spread about what was happening in this cursed stretch of forest. German officers whispered about a sniper team working the area, maybe even a whole specialist unit sent specifically to slow them down and pick them apart. They called for artillery support, but the terrain made it almost useless with all the trees absorbing the blast, and the Americans were positioned too close to their own friendly lines to risk shelling everything without killing their own men. So the Germans had no choice but to push forward again the next morning, tired, soaked to the bone, nervous as hell. And that's when the real damage began. The sniper repeated the trick again and again throughout the second day, shifting positions constantly, resetting rifles in new locations, and using the forest itself as his partner in this deadly game. Sometimes he tied the bootlace to a fallen log position, just right, sometimes to a sapling bent, just enough to pull a trigger when released, sometimes the roots that would snap the cord tight when stepped on. Every shot drew return fire away from his real position, and every mistake the Germans made bought him more precious time to reposition and prepare the next trap. He barely slept. He barely ate. He just waited, listened carefully to every sound, and killed when the moment presented itself. By the end of the second day, German units flatly refused to move through that area without heavy cover fire, and even then they hesitated, arguing with their officers about whether the mission was worth dying for. Soldiers swore on their lives. They were surrounded by hidden shooters. Some claimed they'd heard shots coming from behind their own lines, as if the Americans had somehow infiltrated deep into German territory. Others said the Americans had hidden guns everywhere throughout the forest, set up like some kind of elaborate killing field designed specifically for them. Fear spreads faster than any bullet could travel, and fear makes even the best soldiers careless, and carelessness makes easy targets. One German squad decided they'd had enough of waiting and tried to rush the forest in a desperate charge, firing wildly into the trees and shouting to scare the sniper into revealing himself, or at least making him panic. It didn't work. The American let them pass right by his position without firing a single shot, then calmly aimed at their backs as they ran deeper into the woods, dropping 2 men before slipping away again like a ghost. Another bootlace trap went off moments later when the survivors backtracked in panic, killing a 3rd man. The remaining soldiers ran. They didn't stop running until they reached their own lines. By the 3rd day, the toll had become absolutely staggering and impossible to ignore. 64 German soldiers lay dead in a stretch of forest, no longer than a football field, all victims of one patient American and his understanding of fear. German command finally ordered a full pullback from the area, convinced beyond any doubt they were facing a well-hidden sniper unit backed by Dugan infantry and possibly more support. They never found him. They never even came close to his actual positions. When American lines advanced later that week and swept through the area, they found the aftermath scattered throughout the trees, bodies lying where they'd fallen, shell casings everywhere showing how Much ammunition the Germans had wasted, shooting at ghosts and abandoned gear, left behind in absolute panic. Other soldiers heard the story as it spread through the ranks and shook their heads. In disbelief, one man, one simple trick, 3 days of pure terror. The sniper never bragged about what he'd done. He never kept score or talked about his kills. To him, it was just another job, done, another stretch of ground held, long enough for the war to move forward, and for other men to take his place. He survived the war, went home to America, and faded into the background of history, like so many others who carried its weight in silence and never asked for recognition. But the lesson he left behind still matters today. In World War II, victory didn't always come from bigger guns or more men or better tanks. Sometimes it came from understanding, fear, having patience when everyone else panicked, and knowing that a bootlace tied just right could kill more effectively than a whole platoon firing blind. Thanks for watching this story from WW2 Vault about one of the strangest and deadliest sniper tactics of the entire war. If you want more true combat stories like this, hit subscribe, because next time we're uncovering another moment when creativity and desperation beat raw power in the deadliest conflict in human history.